In this episode of the Project Management Podcast, we look at several successful scope management techniques from across the continents. Hello and welcome back to the Project Management Podcast at pm-podcast.com. I am Cornelius Fichtner and we are coming to you live from the 2019 PMI Global Conference in Philadelphia. And looking out the window, Philadelphia is a really pretty town. There's some wonderful architecture here next to us. And when I say us, I'm welcoming Karthik Ramamurthy back to the program. Hello, Karthik.
Good afternoon, Cornelius. How are you?
I am doing very well. How is your conference going? Because the day you flew in, you picked something up on the flight, and are you feeling better?
Definitely better, but as you know, in life, you take the rough with the smooth. It's been a rough week. Gritting my teeth to finish my conference session tomorrow, and then I'll be off to Chennai on a 30 hours of flying to be back home with my family.
Whoa, okay. I have a 6-hour flight ahead of me on Tuesday, so all right. Your presentation that you will be giving tomorrow is Secret Sauce to Project Success, 7 scope management techniques from several countries. Now, there is a little bit of a giveaway in here, Secret Sauce to Project Success. So this must be related to the book that we talked about last year, Say Yes to Project Success.
It is, Cornelius. As we spoke about last year, our book had 52 specific practical techniques for project success. So my presentation tomorrow is going to be 7 of those techniques specifically pertaining to scope management.
Okay. Before we go there, I see in your presentation slides there's the, about the speaker bio. Okay. The first one reads, sports broadcaster for the 2003 World Cup. What?
And it wasn't the Football World Cup. I'd be much more wildly popular if it was the Football World Cup.
So it must have been cricket.
Yes.
Okay.
This was for the Cricket World Cup held in South Africa.
Okay. And which matches were you broadcasting on?
So, interestingly, this was an internet kind of broadcast even then.
Okay, yes.
In 2003, not many people had access to the internet or phones that could show them the scores. So we sat in a studio in Chennai with the volume turned off on the matches, on the actual commentary, and did live commentary ourselves. People could call into the system, buy a subscription, and listen to the World Cup going on. It was a very popular service.
Wonderful. All right. So let's get into your presentation. And the way you get into your presentation, or will get into it tomorrow, is you start by doing a poll in the audience. PMI has really upped their technical game here, so you can include a poll and people can vote anonymously. And the question of the poll is, what is the impact of an effective scope management on project success? Please vote. A, very high, B, high, C, low, or D, very low. What do you expect the outcome will be?
I expect it to be fairly high. In past conferences when I presented, just to understand the mood of people in the room as compared to people all over the world, I've done the same survey on projectmanagement.com and Facebook and Twitter and so have you. And most of the time, the mood in the room almost perfectly matches the mood of people all over the world. And in this case, a survey that we had done over social media, between very high and high, 95% of people said that ineffective scope management can have a very big impact on project success.
And I see here on one of the further slides further down, 1% said low. Really?
What planet are they living on?
Yes, exactly. Like, really? Okay. Yes, interesting finding here. So, have we gotten better at managing projects over the years and how projects are failing? And
I don't see too much of a difference if you look at the Standish Group's chaos reports. But I also hear that agile projects have far better success rates than waterfall projects. Agile projects, if done better. And with the world growing increasingly agile, wherever agile still fits. I think the overall success rates probably are getting better. The Standish Group haven't updated it since 2016, so we don't know. But being a PMO consultant myself, I do see projects getting better as we move along.
Okay, there are 10 reasons for project failure, and let's go through them quickly here. We have number 10, low stakeholder engagement. 9 is poor and unethical leadership. 8 is poor estimation. 7 is non-alignment to organizational goals. 6 is scope creep. 5, poor communications. 4 is lack of senior management engagement. 3, unrealistic stakeholder expectations. 2, unclear requirements. And 1, ineffective planning. 2 questions. How did these get determined? And 2, how many of these are actually related to scope? It seems like about half of them almost.
Absolutely. And these 10 are once again a subset of the 20 that we got in our book, Cornelius. We did a poll of polls approach.
Yeah.
We searched the internet for polls on for research work on project failure. We looked at where in each of those surveys each failure factor was. We gave them weights, and 45-50 online research studies, which we consolidated, and we came up with 20 in our book. For the purpose of brevity in our session, we're just presenting the top 10, and you'll see, like you very rightly said, stakeholder engagement. If you don't engage the stakeholder enough, you're not going to get your requirements.
Yeah.
Scope creep, communication, unclear requirements. So at least half of them indeed are related to scope management.
Yeah. Fascinating. You then continue with 7 techniques, and I'm scrambling to find the right page here. You continue with 7 techniques, and I'm going to go through them, and there's a reason why I go through them. There will be a test at the end, so pay attention, all right? So the 7 techniques that we are going to look at now in order to improve our scope management are: sense the big picture, utilize agile techniques, capture source and need, connect with the WBS, explicitly exclude, evade scope creep, and defend against gold plating. So we're going to go through these one by one. It'll be about 2 minutes for each of them. I'll read them again at the end, promise, before the test. And
hopefully it will not be as tough as the PMP test.
Yeah, it's not a multiple choice test. There's a single correct answer as well, though. All right, so let's begin with the first one. Sense the big picture. How will that help us improve our scope management?
Have you heard of the term Cornelius, surgery successful, patient dead? Oftentimes on projects, we take off scope, schedule and cost budgets, but we don't deliver what the customer wanted. Oftentimes the customer himself or herself is also at fault because they are not able to explain what they really need in a project. Now, if you're a project manager who looks at it theoretically, you just go ahead, build stuff for all the requirements they have, and put them all together, wrap it, maybe if it's a very rich customer, in nice silk gift wrap and give it to them. And a few months later, they say, this doesn't meet our needs. But I did everything you asked for. Still doesn't meet our needs. So this is why I suggest in our session that go beyond what the customer is asking, do probing questions, use empathy, put yourself in the shoes of the customer. Try and find out what is it that they're really expecting. I'll give you a very simple practical example. Let's say I'm an architect putting together a house for a very rich client. I'd ask by telling him, for this price you can buy double the space in an apartment complex. Why do you want to do it on your own lot? And he might say, you know what, I like my pets. I'd like to play my music loud at night. And that's not something that will work in apartment living. And then I'd say, how about some trees on the periphery of the building? How about some space specifically for the pets? Now, these may not be things he documented in his requirement of a house, but since I asked him why he wanted to do this, and I understand these are two of his requirements, I'd actually go ahead and say, I'll build this in for you, so you'll actually be able to get something that satisfies your needs. So that's why we said sense the big picture.
The next one is utilize agile techniques. And you already alluded to this a little bit earlier when you said that, when it comes to project failure, agile projects are somewhat better due to the cyclical nature of the sprints. Is that where we're heading?
Partially, yes, Cornelius. If you hold the gun to a customer's head and say, by 31st December, I want all your requirements, you can't add in anything later. Now, the customer is going to add stuff which they think they need, but they may not need. They're adding it in because they can't bring it in later. Now, this bloats the requirements. There's research that says out of Microsoft Office's features, regularly used features are only 6%. Features that you use occasionally are another 7%, which means 87% of the features are not used at all, but you're still paying for them. Now, when we use agile techniques like minimum viable product, user stories, user-faced approach, even in a waterfall project, we're able to keep the set of requirements a little shorter because we are more flexible about adding stuff later on. We're able to better manage and give the customer products or deliverables that they can use more frequently. So that was actually using agile techniques. So this way, you break your waterfall projects up into phases, not to the extent that an agile sprint would be, but you still break it up into chunks. You still keep your scope and requirements a little flexible, and you deliver at frequent intervals, which means you and the customer both are happy.
Number 3 is capture source and need.
This is an interesting one, Cornelius. How many times have you, during the course of a project, needed an important clarification from a client?
Who wanted this?
Who wanted this?
Yes, of course.
And then you don't know who wanted that. They scratch their heads and say, did we really ask for this? Now it's been signed into a contract and you can't proceed unless you get that clarification. So one aspect of this technique is where while capturing the requirements, it's a simple thing. You just note down in which user interview, in which brainstorming session, who came up with this requirement. Now that person might have left the organization, but you could go to their superior or one of their colleagues and you can get that clarification. Your team is not sitting waiting for that clarification, wasting valuable time and money. The second part of it is, oftentimes customers might have run out of time and funds in a previous project to do something they really wanted. And they'll try to sneak it into this project because this project has a lot of budget. As a project manager, the more you control the scope, the greater chance you have of doing the project successfully. So what we do is when a client comes up with a requirement, we ask them which part of the overall project scope or goals does this requirement satisfy. Now, if they're going to hem and haw and be evasive and not be able to come up with a real answer, chances are it's a requirement from a previous project trying to sneak into this project. And then I'd ask them to justify it. If they can't, we'd say that we'd rather spend more time on things that will make your project successful rather than this requirement. So when we actually shorten requirements into scope, this would be one of the things that would drop off scope because it doesn't meet the business need of the project.
We're moving on to connect with the WBS.
How democratic is the WBS exercise? Do you have a lot of people participate? Oftentimes I see in projects that it's only a few senior folk who get down and put the WBS together. Mm-hmm. Now, this creates an issue where there's not enough buy-in. People think they're overloaded with stuff. They are not able to see the big picture because they're putting together these few bricks in the WBS, but they're not able to see what the project is supposed to do. I remember the story of the extraordinary stone breaker, a company where they were breaking stones, sheer manual labor, huge differences in productivity. There was one man who was 30% more productive than others. And HR wanted to find out. They always want to find out the secrets of successful people, right? They went to the people who were below average and asked, what do you do here? These people laughed and said, can't you see we are breaking stones? They went to people who were slightly more productive and asked them, what is it that you do here? And some people said, I'm finding money to send my son to college. I'm able to feed my family. I'm able to buy a house. They went to this man. He wasn't the tallest, strongest, or youngest looking. And they wonder, what is it that you're doing? He said, I'm building a church. The stones he was breaking were actually going to a site where a church or a mosque or a temple was being built. And this bigger picture made him more productive. So when you involve people more in the process of building the WBS, they feel valued. I mean, getting even the junior members, your WBS becomes better because they may have ideas of certain things in scope they may forget. There's more buy-in because they've been involved in this effort. They see the bigger picture and your project can be more successful.
We have the fifth of your techniques, and this is interesting because yesterday I was at a workshop, and at that workshop we were asked to write things down about scope onto a few sticky notes, and the first thing that I wrote down is specifically exclude what is not included in the scope, and here we come to it, explicitly exclude.
Absolutely. So the story I'm going to mention at tomorrow's session, Cornelius, on this particular tip is there's an advertising company that was designing a brochure for a large manufacturer. This was a marketing brochure, manufacturer of consumer goods in South India, where we basically have 5 large states. They do this brochure, they design it, the team likes it, they deliver 10,000 copies on time with exceptional quality, and then the client says, English is great, where are the other 4 languages, Malayalam, Kannada, Tamil and Telugu? Now, the client said, the agency said, look, you didn't mention 5 languages, and the client said, we told you this is for rural markets, village markets. Do you think everybody in village markets knows English? Now, if only the agency had very clearly said what was there in their minds. It was clear in their minds that they were doing English. If they had said this is only in English, oftentimes our scope statements have a lot of what is in scope, very little of what is excluded. In fact, Cornelius, I know a lot of my clients who put in a simple sentence. Whatever is explicitly not mentioned here as being in scope is considered out of scope. That's all. That one short sentence. Do you think the client reads it and takes it seriously? No. So what I do with my PMO clients is I tell them at least 25% of your scope statement has to include explicit exclusions. Now you may find the client running up to you and say, no, this is something I want. And you can negotiate. You can negotiate for extra payment, extra time, and have it included in the contract. It's far better to have this discussion now at the start of the project rather than at the end when everything is ruined because of misconception.
And I think this is also the point of this here. You know, in some companies, you use templates and forms where you define what the project is all about. And there are check boxes and maybe drop downs that you select from. To me, that's project management by template. Okay.
Yes.
What you should really be doing is you should be using this moment as a means to communicate with your customer, to go to them, to sit down, to discuss this thing through, to have a one-on-one or one-on-many conversations, to get to understand what it is they're looking for. right? And at that point, you can then also ask questions. Well, you're saying this. Do you also mean that? No, we don't mean that. Oh, let me write that down. You do not mean that. You mean this, right? And this conversation and this documentation is really what clarifies things. And that brings, first of all, the team much more together, and it clarifies the scope up front.
I agree 100%, Cornelius.
We have 2 more to go, and the next one is evade scope creep. Hard to evade sometimes.
How to evade, yeah. I agree. Oftentimes, inexperienced project managers, or even some experienced ones at the start of the project, want to get on very good terms with the client. The client says, this small extra, that small extra, can I have this bit more? The project manager thinks, why do I want to start off this relationship on a rocky note? Why do I want to keep saying no? The client is going to think I'm difficult to deal with. And the project manager agrees. The story I will narrate in my session tomorrow is about an Eskimo who was using a dog sled to get from one village to another, and the next village is some 3 days away. He has enough food in his sled for his dogs and for himself. Food and drink. For a long while, several hours, he sees a lone wolf following him. The intelligent man thinks, okay, the wolf it can smell the meat, it wants some food, it is hungry too, let me throw a trap. 1 hour later, a pack of wolves comes in, kills the man and his dogs. But this is what will happen if you allow small bits of extra requirements for free. We all love change requests if they are paid for. But if the change request is going to be free, if it will not give me extra time, then I'm killing myself. So that trickle will turn into a flood that will drown you. Which is why we say, even at the start, you may accept it, but don't blindly accept it. Don't make it easy for the customer. You can explain now, this will cost you so much. Are you willing to pay for it? Or you say this will lead to 3 weeks of delay in the project because you've added this now. Are you willing to accept that? Right? Or you say, please submit a change control form, and the change control form may be 10 pages long. Use the change control board as a buffer. This is not to avoid giving the customer what they want, but accepting a lot of free stuff. Because if you do that, you're bound for failure. Paid for change requests where we have extra time, perfectly welcome. But if it's going to be a free change request, and the customer will always say it's a small thing. Come on, how long is it going to take? 10 minutes? And then it becomes a flood. So we talk about being a little proactive right up front. We can always be personable and friends with the customer, but accepting free change requests is not the way to build that relationship.
And then finally, we have defend against gold plating.
So, Cornelius, today we live in a world of innovation and creativity. We have young, fresh people coming into our teams. We have engineering graduates who want to build the best mousetrap ever. And during the course of the project, they're going to try and add bells and whistles to try and make the customer delighted. So the story I talk about is where a very large pharmaceutical company did a global RFP. They got several proposals. They narrowed it down to 3 companies. Now these 3 companies were so close in terms of technical commercials. After a lot of negotiations, the company said, we can't flip a coin. These 3 are too close. So we'll define a small 2-month project, which will be done free by the companies, proof of concept, demonstration of capability, and then they decide based on performance in that project. The project manager at one of those companies for this 2-month project had everything done in 5 weeks. He said, boom, this is my chance, my career is made. And he had some kind of intelligence which told him that the other companies would only submit just in time. So he said, I have 3 weeks to delight the customer. Went ahead and added a lot of bells and whistles. You know the sad part? First to be disqualified, this project manager. Because the company said, look, You said you follow global methodologies like the PMBOK and PMI, and gold plating is a definite no. You could have come to us at the end of 5 weeks and said, I'm ready. Do you want me to deliver now? Or would you like to define a few extra things I'll still do in those 2 months? And then we'd have given it to you probably even without going through the others. But you assume what I want. They said, no, this was just a pilot project. They said, no, you will do this on a time and material contract. You'll continue billing me things that I don't need. You're disqualified. So customer delight doesn't necessarily have to mean extras. Because we tend to think customer delight is more than what the customer asks for. But you know what? Considering project failure, do you think the customer really expects you to deliver full scope, on time, within budgets, with benefits realized? Do you think so? 75% of the time they're disappointed. Right? Deep inside their minds, they don't expect you to deliver on time, on budget, full scope. Now, if you do, you're delighting them. If you gold plate, you're giving them something extra, defeating the main purpose of timely completion of the project on budget. So you can do value addition. All of that comes at the start of the project, at the proposal stage, before you finalize, but not during the project. Even during the project, ask the customer, is this something you want? Will you pay for it? This will make your project better. Like we spoke about facilities for the pet and a row of trees outside the house. Tell the customer this will really improve your benefits. If the customer agrees to pay, then it's no longer gold plating. Gold plating is I call it project manager suicide. As such, you find it difficult to deliver a project with full scope, on time, within budget. You increase the scope, you don't get paid, you lose out on time. So that was the last tip. And you'll find, Cornelius, that all of these are very practical. These are not 30,000 feet up in their theories. I want people to walk out of the session with actionable stuff that they can actually use.
Yes, and I believe our listeners are experiencing exactly the same. So this was the secret sauce to success, the secret sauce to project success, 7 scope management techniques from several continents. Now, before we close this interview, let me go through these 7 techniques again for you, all right? Because remember, we said there would be a test at the end. Sense the big picture, utilize agile techniques, capture source and need, connect with the WBS, explicitly exclude, evade scope creep, and defend against gold plating. Now, what might the test be, you're asking? Well, for that, you are going to have to go to the website, and on the website, we are going to put up a question, and you'll see what it is when you're on the website, and there will be a prize for those who are going to answer that question correctly. Obviously, if you listen to this particular interview 5 and 10 years from now, then this whole giveaway and this whole prize will already be gone. But it's still going to be interesting for you to stop by at the website and see, well, what is that test that they are talking about? And why is Cornelius continuously repeating these 7 techniques for me? All right. You end your presentation with a slide that says 3 bonus tips. All right. That's my final question for you. Karthik, what are the 3 bonus tips that you are going to leave your attendees tomorrow and with which we are going to leave our listeners today?
So the bonus tips, unfortunately, Cornelius, are going to come from the audience.
Are they going to come from the audience?
We're going to ask people in the audience to share their own techniques outside of these 7 that they've actually used to deliver scope management success. So
what we will do is you're going to write down these bonus tips, I hope, and then you can send them to me and we will put them up on the website as well.
Indeed,
so there's another reason for everyone to visit the website and look at the show notes for this particular episode. Well, Karthik, thank you so much for having stopped by again here and introducing us to these 7 tips. We appreciate your time.
Indeed, my pleasure, Cornelius. Thanks so much for having me. Please do continue this amazing knowledge sharing journey that you've been on, and I know personally it benefits several thousands of people all over the world.